Hey everyone, welcome to Resilience Unravelled. This podcast is a result of my fascination with subjects like resilience, accountability, burnout, life fulfillment and other life and work-based performance issues, as well as many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, people and organisations, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories and expertise, as well as my own synthesis of the key issues, strategies, tips, tools and resources to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, why not go over to our site qedod.com. If you'd like some resources on how to manage and beat burnout, head to qedod.com/burnout2019 for some goodies. Stay tuned to the end to find out details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So today I'm very interested and excited and quite enthused to talk to a woman called Mary Shores. Now I first came across Mary because of a couple of colleagues of mine who run another podcast called The Next 100 Days. And those two guys aren't prone to being enthusiastic about much, but they were raving about Mary's interview. And then I met her online and I got all enthusiastic and started raving about her as well. And I've just bought her book, and I'm thoroughly enjoying looking at that as well. So, hi Mary.
Hello, Russell.
So there you are. I've already spent money, so that's a good sign, isn't it?
That's always a good sign.
Do you know, I was really impressed, Mary. I went onto Amazon, and we'll talk about your book in a moment, and not that I'm easily distracted, but you have 72 5-star reviews. Do you realise that?
I do realize that, and it was very interesting to me because I remember as a first-time author, I was terrified for those reviews to come in because sometimes, people can be brutal in reviews, but we've not experienced that. People love the book.
Yeah, I don't have 72 friends, so I'm very impressed. So, first of all, it's a pleasure to chat to you today. And where in the world are you? Because I gather by your accent, you're not slumming it in England today.
I am in the lovely Champaign, Illinois, which is the land of cows and cornfields.
Cows and cornfields? Why cows and cornfields?
It's just what we have around here. So in the United States, in the middle states, a large portion of it is very flat lands, very farming grounds. So there's no hills here. It's very green. Lots of farms and farm animals and corn and wheat and beans.
You see, that sounds lovely. I'm sitting in the middle of summer in Britain at the moment, under 73 tons of water. So that just sounds marvellous. Mm. But anyway, we're here to talk about two fascinating things. One, which is resilience and your own story, which is remarkable in itself. But also this book you've written, which I think is, I'm going to say it's almost the secret of mental toughness. From what I've seen of it so far, and hopefully we can have a bit of a chat about that, and let's encourage some of my audience to have a read of it for you, because I think it's a really interesting book and you've got some great ideas. So first of all, tell us a bit about you, tell us a bit about your story, because you're someone who really personifies resilience.
Resilience is a huge theme in my life. I actually feel like I have radical resilience. As a matter of fact, I was featured in a documentary series called the Global Resilience Project. And the woman, Emma Bell, she chose 50 people from around the world who had recovered from some unspeakable tragedies, but had gone on to not just recover, but to actually thrive. And so a lot of people have gotten pretty fascinated with my story because early on, I was out on my own. What I really love people to know is that as a 16-year-old, I was out on my own, a juvenile in an adult world, just trying to survive. And when I was 19, I had a daughter who passed away. She was born with extremely severe brain damage, which left her blind. It left her deaf. She was unable to suck a bottle, so she had to have a gastrostomy tube inserted into her stomach, and she was on full life support, something breathing for her and, causing her heart to beat. For the first several days of her life. And after she got off life support, she did live for a year and a half, But as a young 19-year-old girl, I spent my time living in the children's hospital in Indianapolis, Indiana. There's a children's hospital there, and it really affected me because the things you see in the children's hospital are things you can just never ever unsee, such as the children in the burn units, the cancer units. I'm dealing with life or death situations every single day with my own child, but all around me is just all of this hopelessness.
Yeah. And and that puts things into perspective as well, I suppose.
I think that when I was 19, I really didn't have the developmental capacity to process what was happening to me at the time. So now that I'm 45, and especially while I was writing the book, I did revisit quite often that time period in my life, looking at pictures, talking to people who were in my life at that time. And it was really very healing process because you see, the thing is, and this is why I think where we need to go in terms of resilience is understanding that trauma is stored in our bodies. Our bodies are like a library, and all of these things that happen to us in our lives get stored in this library, and it affects us in ways that aren't so obvious. So we have a trauma as a child or as a young adult, and we ever so slightly begin to pivot the way that we make decisions based on how these traumas have changed our brain. And it's just very fascinating. And what the twist in my personal story is, after my daughter passed away, I hit a rock bottom moment for a while, and then I was able to bounce back. And when I was 24, I started my first business. And so people ask me often, how were you able to do that? And the thing is that I would love to tell people this big empowerment story, but the truth is, Russell, it did not come from a place of empowerment. It actually came from a place of despair.
Yes.
It came from a place of, now, I'm 21, 22, all of my friends are, my peer group, they're graduating college. They're getting their first jobs. They've got marketing degrees and psychology degrees and history degrees, and they're getting job offers for salaried positions, and I'm sitting here working not much above minimum wage. And I realized that if I didn't do something, my fate was not going to change.
Right.
And the funny thing was, I sort of felt like it was past my time to go to college. Isn't that weird? Like, as a grown person, I think that's a crazy thought. But, we're driven so much by the way we believe and perceive our world. So when I was 22, I thought, oh, well, I'm too old to go to college. So I decided to start this business. And, of course, there's no way I could have known then that I was going to be on a mission to be changing the conversation around debt collections, all of the things that have happened. It's just been such a roller coaster.
So your first business, what was it in the world of debt collection, was it?
Absolutely. Isn't that odd?
Why that then? Why go there first?
That's a great question. So primarily it's, have you ever been 22?
I'm going to say not long ago, but yes, I have been 22. But a long time ago.
When you're 22 and you think that you literally know everything in the world.
Oh, yes.
My son is 18.
Yeah.
And he thinks he knows everything. There's no value I can provide to him with my, sage wisdom, because he knows everything about the world and how to navigate it. So that's how I was when I was 22. I really felt overly confident. It's almost like my naivete was a good thing. And my parents had owned a collection agency while I was growing up. They collected debt. It was just a small local town shop, as we call them. And that's why I thought I knew how to run this business. Well, it turns out I didn't know anything. And I had to educate myself over the next coming years. And the thing was that I was struggling because I never wanted to be the bad guy.
Right.
And in debt collections, it's very much about being the bad guy. You know, the guy who can threaten the most was the one who was getting the money back in those days. And I really wanted to do something different because I was very passionate about understanding debt is a psychological burden. And it's a burden that keeps people from living the life of their dreams. As a matter of fact, I was just reading some statistics in the UK. There is a high percentage of suicides that are directly related to financial disharmony.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does, because there are 5 basic human fears, which are poverty. It's poverty, illness, loss of love, and loss of love doesn't necessarily mean a loved one dying, but it's also the same feeling if you're a parent or you love someone very much, that seeing them suffer is worse than going through the suffering yourself. Yeah. And then we also have a fear of old age and death. But poverty is the number one fear, even over death.
Right. Yes, and of course, the thing about death is that it's finished, isn't it? So you're not aware of it. But of course, living in poverty is a real problem. And we have so I'm interested in your views on this, because actually in the UK we have what's called the poverty index, where you reach a certain stage and you're called living in poverty. But actually that's something, I think at the moment it's about £22,000 a year, which is about $30,000. And poverty is relative, isn't it? Because you go to India, it's a lot lower than that. And poverty is a problematical area, isn't it? Because actually it's a process that rewires your brain as well. That chemical cocktail gets really changed by it, doesn't it?
It's absolutely true, and I believe that it causes trauma. I think that the fear of it causes trauma. Having anything unexpected happen to your finances causes trauma. A big tax bill, or, if you got an unexpected diagnosis and perhaps you're not properly covered with whatever your insurance coverage is. There's just so many reasons that we can be, even the most wealthiest people in the world still suffer from that same fear. In fact, I feel like, and this is just my opinion, but that it's interesting to me that Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, and yet he does not want to donate money to charity.
No. Well, isn't he going to be donating to his ex-wife soon?
I think so, and then she's donating it all. And it's fascinating to me, because here is a man that could live out the rest of his days in opulence that the rest of the world doesn't even understand, and yet he still can't let go of it.
And people have very complex relationships with money, don't they? There are people who are frightened of having too much, and people who are driven to make money, and then they're still not happy even when they've got copious amounts. I mean, it's interesting, you talk about the not giving it away, but actually money for a lot of people just makes them miserable, because actually money isn't really the issue. But it's interesting that you talk about this fear of poverty, because actually that's a slightly different issue, and that's very interesting. So carry on. Sorry, I interrupted you and probably took you off your train of thought. You were talking about these 5 fears and how they rewire us.
Oh, it was really when I began to understand that the people that I was talking to on the phone who owed a debt, they were really in a state of panic. They were in their fight or flight system. And so I ever so slightly, actually it wasn't so slightly. One day I had actually a very defining moment in my life where I was exhausted from this job. It was mentally tearing me down, because I owned this business. I wanted to do well in life, but I also wanted to sleep at night, and and maybe because I had been on the other side, I had been on welfare, I had been on food stamps. When I say I had nothing in living in this children's hospital, I literally had no resources. Yeah. I had no guidance. I really had nothing, except for myself and, the clothes on my back. That was it. And so perhaps because I had been on the other side, I could understand these people. And I started I just really one day looked at the phone and I said, I want the next person who calls to just be happier at the end of the call than they were at the beginning. And that was in 2005. Little did I know that day was going to change the entire rest of my life.
Go on. That's too much of a teaser for me not to be sucked straight into that story. You carry straight on.
Well, because what happened was almost as a gift from, or downloads from the universe, I started to be gifted with this information, because when you make a decision that your goal in life is just to make these people happy, gradually I started figuring out how to do that. And it began with creating this do not say list. And so the do not say list is a list of words that just never get used. And the words are no, not, can't, won't, however, and unfortunately. Because what I realized is these people are already in a state of panic. They're already in a state of fight or flight. They're already traumatized. They really need deep healing. And the first step for me was to not worsen the situation for them. And the only thing I had control over was the words that I was using to talk to them on the phone.
And you're absolutely right. I don't think people really think about self-talk, never mind the talk that we use for other people. It's a very casual medium, isn't it? And yet, actually, it's the window on our soul, really, isn't it? Rather than our eyes, it really is what we say. Communication, whether it's interpersonal communication with ourselves, whether it's in a business situation, whether it's with our family and our loved ones and our friends, communication is at the root of everything. It is quintessential. Communication is at the root of being human and the human experience. So you've come up with this do not say list, and so how did you begin to use that at work, and how else did you begin to, I suppose, de-escalate the relationship you're having with these people who owe money? Well, the first thing I had to do was, if I was never going to say the word no, I had to know what I was going to say instead. True. So I wrote out a list. On the left side of the paper, I wrote stop saying. Yeah. And on the right side of the paper, I wrote start saying. Okay. And so for every instance that I thought it was necessary to answer a question with no, I just wrote out a phrase telling people what I could do instead of what I couldn't do. Okay. And it really changed everything. And there was a lot more to it, because as I started to study human neurology, neurochemistry, the stress chemicals, I started to understand what people really needed was to feel heard. It's like we have these situations and we're unable to emotionally move on in a conversation until we've checked the box in our mind that we have been heard. And then as soon as we can do that, the person can emotionally move on. I'm sure you've had an experience at some point, especially being a podcast host, that you're talking to someone who is really stuck in their own story. And it's like you're talking to this person and they're telling you this long story and it's really not on the point, but you try to get in there and the next thing you know, they've started that story over from the beginning. I'm going to say yes. Only because it's so true. Oh, I'm glad that you can understand, because the thing is, the reason that people get on that autopilot story and repeat it over and over again is because there's a part of them that doesn't feel heard. There's a part of them that has not felt understood, and it's very important that their situation is validated. Especially I see it in the coaching industry all the time. I'm sure that with a podcast about resilience that you've had lots and lots of coaches on, and a lot of times they want to get you out of that story and they want to get you moving forward, which is great. But we have to be emotionally receptive to that information. And so we really need our experience validated. And what that would look like is just some simple words like, I can really see what you're going through here. I feel like, come on, people, it's time to really understand the connection power of empathy and compassion. Because there's something lacking right now in our society for that. Yeah, I really want to argue with you, because I normally do, but I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. And I think actually the point of the herd thing is it's this idea of control, isn't it? I think people, more than anything else, fear a lack of control, and all those big things that you put up earlier are all about control issues. And So I'm interested. So you put this list together. You're now dealing with people. I'm guessing this is useful stuff with employees and team members and such like. So you've got this list. So how did that begin to change things? How did that change the dynamic of the relationships with the people that owed money?
It started to change the way that they were looking at debt. One of my early on goals was I wanted people to feel good about the fact that they were paying a debt instead of feeling the shame and the unworthiness for having a debt.
I see. So you're sort of reframing the concept in their heads in a way.
And here's what's interesting. A school counselor contacted me recently, and she said that she heard me on a show. She got the book. She goes, initially I was resistant because I didn't see what I would have in common with a debt collector. But she works with a group of students that are at-risk population. So these are the students that are, they've got some kind of situation at home. They're already underperforming at school. They're at risk. They're in a bad place. And her student population in March was only passing at an 8% passing rate. So that means, not very many of her students were doing well. And she said she applied all of my techniques with these students, and that 2 months later, at the end of that semester, so school here in the U.S. lets out in May, sometimes June. By the end of May, she had them at a 96% passing rate. They went from 8% passing to 96% passing. It's time to understand that we are living in times where, that's how resilience is made. When she's healing those children with her words, and she's giving them the resilience that they're going to need. She's teaching them the coping skills by her kindness, her compassion, her ability to validate. So it goes validate, and then you want to plant a seed of happiness. So you validate someone's experience. I can completely see why this is troubling you. And then you plant a seed of happiness, which would be something like, I want to assure you, or the great news is, or, I'm very confident, something, and then you can hit them with the solution.
Mm. And so are you still working in this organisation? Because, a lot of people who have written books and such like, they sort of give up what made them great in the first place and then become coaches. But I get, it's sort of, what if you can't do it, teach it almost. But you're still working on it. You're still running an organisation.
I do. I run my organization, and I run a training and development company for corporations where we teach transformational communication all the time to other companies. I am on a mission to change that conversation around debt. So I'm working heavily in the debt collections industry in the U.S., as well as hopefully writing more books because I love writing.
So looking back at your career as a CEO and an operator in an organisation, what do you think managers and leaders need to do to build resilience in their teams? Because a bit like you talked about the school teachers, sometimes you need to learn these skills, don't you?
It's so interesting talking about leadership because there's a sense of empowerment that can be handed down or handed across from one person to another. I think that one of the beginning places for communication in leadership is to begin with clarity. Just yesterday, I took a frantic phone call from my mother, my mother lives in fear a lot because she is always worried she's going to lose her job. And there are places where the office politics make people fearful every day that if they just step their toe in one wrong direction, they're going to get that pink slip. And she called and she said, I don't know what to do because my executive director told me to get all of this information to him by Tuesday. But there's another boss who's actually more senior than the executive director, who's the vice president, gave me the opposite directions. And so, of course, now she's in a panic because she doesn't want to call out. She doesn't want to be a tattletale. She's terrified to ask for clarity, but she's got two opposing directions. And so one of the things that I think is extremely important in leadership is to always be transparent always provide as much clarity as possible. And even if you don't even know what the clarity is, to be transparent about that and say, here's where we're at in the process. And as soon as we know more, we will definitely communicate it.
That's interesting because it's often said that, actually I think the whole leadership thing is completely overcomplicated. And I've always had it boiled down to about being, having clarity and being relentless. So, just applying the same thing over and over and over again. And from that comes trust and accountability. And I find it hard to understand why people overcomplicate it. And I wonder what's your view on that.
I've actually felt the same way as you many, many times. In fact, I remember when I was younger, I used to worry because I didn't think I had the best personality. And I remember believing that to be a good leader, you had to have this really, cheerleader personality. And I don't have that at all. In fact, I'm very, very direct. What I learned was that it's really about sharing your mission. I have a team of who I believe are utter rock stars, and my team impresses me on a daily basis, and we are such a close-knit bunch, and I'm so proud of them. And when I really look at the reasons why, it's because I'm honest. It's because I take accountability when I make a mistake. It's because if they don't appreciate something I did, they know they can tell me. And it's because I share my vision and my mission with them. And they can get behind that because it makes them know that they are a part of something.
Well, I think what you're doing is you're stating a vision and mission, and people can choose to join in. And that, of course, is control, and that is back to accountability. And I think this word is overused and understood today in the same way that leadership is. I think part of what you're saying here, making words important and defining them and making them simple. The skill is making a word like leadership and clarity easy so people know what you're talking about.
That's right. And it's so funny because in talking about resilience, there was so much that I didn't understand of how my work touched upon resilience because I had staff that was becoming very empowered, and I had one person was able to get off all of her prescription medication. People were healing from their past traumas just because we're rewiring ourselves with the way we communicate every single day. And that's how I have been able to continue to recover from a lot of the roller coaster traumas that I've been through. And it only begins to deepen every year. And the more that my path expands in life, the more that I'm getting an even more understanding about healing.
So I know you've very kindly said we can record a separate episode all about your book, which I really want to talk about in more depth. But just to round this section off, just thinking back over the career of Mary Shaw's, what's the big message that that you would take out of your own life so far?
I think that the big message is we're okay. And we need to remember that money is a made-up thing. We literally invented it, but we live by it. We value ourselves by it. We've put so much definition on this money that it is making us sick, and it's causing issues. I feel like when I was a young girl, I loved to play the game Monopoly.
Yeah.
And in the game of Monopoly, there's only one way to win the game. Do you remember what it is?
Well, I used to find owning the bank, being the banker, the best way to win the game.
Well,
so maybe there's two ways. There's a legitimate way and a naughty way.
Uh-huh. The way that I knew how to win Monopoly was the only way to win was you had to bankrupt all your friends.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And that is so representative of business in the last century.
Yeah.
Right? But there's another way, and that way is through collaboration. How we're really going to make a difference and change in this world is through collaboration and stop playing Monopoly.
Yeah, I think it's an important business lesson to say that actually we're not trying to win by destroying other people's businesses. We're trying to win and grow the overall landscape. And I think once you understand that, I think business becomes a lot easier, doesn't it?
Brilliant. Yes, absolutely.
Mary, it's been a delight to talk to you, and I'm hoping people will join us for part 2 when we're going to talk about your book, which I really genuinely believe to be something quite special. So thank you so much for taking time with us today, Mary, and I hope to speak to you soon.
My pleasure.
You take care. Thanks for listening today. You can go to our site qedod.com/podcasts and subscribe to hear other titles in our series. Or you can contact us at info@qedod.com to hear and find out more about tough love, leadership, accountability, resilience and burnout. You can go to our site qedod.com/burnout2019 to hear and get access to a load of resources to help you manage and fight burnout. And you can go to qedod.com/free ebook to hear more about the fundamentals of resilience. Until the next episode, keep on thriving.